What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. We'll be going over every backfield today, talking about which running backs I'd be starting and sitting. But before we do that, have to start things off with the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was what wide receiver led the league in air yards in both Week 8 and Week 9. And the answer is Jerry Jeudy. He's been a buy low for a while, but that window may have closed. And Hey Bojo was the first to get that one right. Today's stat. Over the last 3 weeks, what wide receiver leads the league in weighted opportunity rating? All right, let's just jump right into things. So Thursday night game, we've got the Colts and the Titans. This game has a 48.5 point over-under, and the Titans are 2-point home favorites. For the Colts, we have probably the most annoying committee ever. The Titans are a below average run defense, so this is also a winnable game. We had the 2-point spread, so bad run defense. I don't want to say bad. They're like slightly below average. Talking about the Titans there. We have this Colts team going up against a slightly below average defense in a game they could win. This could be a great spot for the ground game. But unfortunately, we have this split that we can't really tell who's going to be getting the touches. I have Taylor in one of my leagues, as you guys know, and he is currently on my bench behind Miles Sanders, Robinson, Gibson, Chase Edmonds, and if Drake were to return this week, I would bench Edmonds, and I'd probably start Ayuk over Jonathan Taylor. I don't trust him right now. I want to see them use him and not bench him for an entire half before I'm willing to start him. He is, I guess, a flex play this week if you really need to start him, but I would prefer to keep him on the bench. And then I do not trust Wilkins. I do not trust Hines. I don't think that the volume is enough for Hines each week to be worth it outside of maybe a 14-team full PPR league, but even then, it's a little bit thin. For the Titans, pretty easy. Always start Derrick Henry. Next up, we've got the football team at the Lions. This game actually does not have a line right now. I think Vegas is waiting on Matthew Stafford news. I will do this breakdown assuming Stafford is active, but if Stafford is out, then it's a boost to Antonio Gibson and an obvious downgrade to Adrian Peterson and DeAndre Swift. So for Washington, Gibson has scored 5 touchdowns in the last 7 weeks, but he only had 9 touches last week, which was a season low. I really don't think that's a sign of things to come, so I would expect him to continue producing as a running back 2, continue getting in that 12 to 15 touch kind of range. That's where he should be on average. I still think he's going to produce a running back 2 this week as well because this is a really nice matchup. The Lions rank 21st in rush defense DVOA, 30th in yards per carry allowed. They've given up the most fantasy points to opposing running backs. And so, yeah, Gibson, I think mid to high end even running back 2 this week. And honestly, in a full PPR league, I think McKissick is a running back 2 as well. He's averaging 6 receptions per game over the last 5 weeks, including 14 targets last week on 83% of the snaps. And that doesn't mean Gibson got 17%. There were a lot of plays where both Gibson and McKissick were on the field, probably because they don't have that many great pass catchers. Why not use both of them and use McKissick in the short receiving game? And so, given that the upside for touchdowns is low with McKissick, and he's not going to get many carries, I would still very much prefer him in a full PPR league. But again, a running back 2 in a full PPR league, more of a flex play and half PPR. But I bet you he's on free agency in a lot of leagues, so you can go out and get him if you need him. For the Lions, Swift outtouched Adrian Peterson 16-11 last week and outgained him 97-43. They need to feature Swift soon. I think they're going to at some point. It's just when is that going to happen? The football team does have a great front 7 though, and this is a difficult matchup because of that. So assuming Stafford's active, I consider Swift a running back 2, and then I probably would not play Adrian Peterson outside of maybe a deeper standard format. And then if Stafford is out, it's a downgrade. You're definitely not playing Peterson, and I think Swift would drop into a flex play. Next up, we have Jaguars at Packers. This game has a 51.5 point total, and the Packers are the largest favorites of the week at 13.5 points. For the Jaguars, James Robinson is a featured back, and he has just been incredible this season. This is an incredible spot. The Packers rank 6th toughest in success rate allowed to wide receivers, but have allowed the second most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, the most receptions, the most touchdowns to running backs. James Robinson is a top 5 running back this week. For the Packers, Aaron Jones looked fully healthy last week, and he was the feature back while the game was close. The Jaguars also have a trash run defense, and so given that the Packers are also massive home favorites, Aaron Jones is a top 5 running back as well this week. Jamal Williams will return this week from the COVID list. Unfortunately, his touch ceiling isn't that high while Jones is healthy, and so he's really just a flex option this week, and he would be better if you're assuming the game's going to blow out. If the Packers win by 25 points, well, it's likely that Jamal Williams is going to have some part in that. If the game remains closer, then it's probably going to be more Aaron Jones. But given the matchup, given the 13.5 point spread, you could probably use Jamal Williams in the flex if you need to. Next up, we've got Eagles at Giants, and we just had this matchup a few weeks ago where the Eagles won a close game 22-21, so not surprising the total is set at 44.5, and that the Eagles are 3.5 point road favorites. For the Eagles, Miles Sanders is set to return, so you should be starting him and benching all other Eagles running backs. This isn't an easy matchup, but you start Sanders when he's active. For the Giants, Gallman is very clearly their best running back, but they insist on giving other guys opportunity, and that's resulted in a split in workload between Gallman, Lewis, and Morris while Freeman has been out, and Freeman might even return this week. I think if Freeman returns, that kind of takes the work away from Lewis and Morris. I really don't think that it's taking work away from Gallman. I think it's going to be a very even split between Freeman and Gallman, in which case, if Freeman returns, I'm not starting any running back for the Giants. But if Freeman were out again, I think you can start Gallman in the flex, but nothing really better than the flex, and I still kind of don't even love that. But if you really need to, flex play for Gallman, still not starting anyone else regardless of what happens. Bucks at Panthers is up next. This game has a 50.5 point total, and the Bucks are 6 point road favorites. For the Bucks, Aaron Jones and Fournette combined for 4 total carries last week as the Bucks got stomped by the Saints. That's not something we should expect to happen every week, obviously, so we can sort of throw that sort of game script out of our minds this week. The most likely outcome here is that Jones and Fournette split the carries, and they're going to split more than 4 carries this week, with Fournette getting a little bit more work in the receiving game, and both kind of have the same touchdown upside. Unlike last week when they were matched up with the Saints, this is a much more attackable spot. The Panthers rank 26th in rush defense DVOA and have allowed the 5th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. The Bucks are also favorites this week, and pretty heavy favorites, so it should be a positive game script for both Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette. Because of the reception upside, I do value Fournette a little bit more than Ronald Jones. I think he's more of a running back too, whereas Jones is more of a flex play. For the Panthers, I'm expecting McCaffrey to miss this week with a shoulder injury, but we're going to know heading into the week, so it's not something worth speculating, and it's pretty easy what we do in each circumstance. If McCaffrey's out, start Mike Davis. If McCaffrey's playing, well, you play McCaffrey when he's out there. Pretty easy breakdown there. I don't really care what the matchup is. Next up, we've got Texans at Browns in what should be one of the higher scoring games of the week. The total has risen up to 53 points, and the Browns are 3.5 point home favorites. David Johnson is in the concussion protocol, and if he's out, then Duke Johnson should take over as the feature back, and he would be a great play as like a mid to high end running back too. If David Johnson is active, then he'd be more of like a mid-range running back too. The Browns rank 19th in rush defense DVOA, 11th in yards per carry allowed, 29th in pass success rate allowed to running backs, and then 19th in most fantasy points given up to running backs. So you add all that together, basically the Browns are an average defense, but they're more susceptible to running back reception. So given the high total, given that the Texans are favored, it is a good spot for whoever ends up being the lead back. And so if Duke is the lead back because David Johnson is out, you should probably be playing him. But if Duke is the backup, well, there's not probably enough opportunity for him to produce more than like low-end flex play in deeper format. And again, if David Johnson's playing, you're playing him. For the Browns, Nick Chubb is expected back this week, and in his 3 healthy games, the volume split was 17 carries and 1 target per game to Chubb, and then 13 carries and 3.7 targets per game to Kareem Hunt. Chubb also scored 4 touchdowns in those 3 weeks compared to 3 for Hunt. Realistically, they are both low-end 1 to high-end 2s in this spot. The Texans rank 27th in rush defense DVOA, last in yards per carry allowed, last in yards total allowed to running backs, at least rushing yards allowed to running backs, and they've given up the 3rd most fantasy points per game to running backs. This is a smash spot for both of these backs, and so I would be starting both of them, of course, assuming Chubb is back, and then obviously if Chubb isn't back, yeah, you're starting Kareem Hunt. Broncos at Raiders is up next. This game has a 52-point total, and the Raiders are 5-point home favorites. For the Broncos, Lindsey and Gordon have been splitting the work these last 2 weeks. We've seen Gordon get 14 carries and 8 targets to Lindsey's 14 carries and 6 targets. So that sort of volume split would be fine if it were one game, but not really across 2 games, right? Like I don't want 7 carries and a few targets. That's really just not enough volume to be viable. If neither of them is going to get more than 7, 8, 9 carries, then how could you possibly start either of them? So I would keep them both on the bench until one of them commands some sort of consistent volume. If you really, really are desperate because of bye weeks and injuries, though, I guess you could throw them into the flex, but don't expect much to happen, even in a really good matchup. I mean, the Raiders have a weak run defense. They've allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to the position, so it is possible they skew a little bit run heavy in this one. But still, if they're going to split the volume completely and they're not going to get as many targets as we'd hope for, definitely not consistent targets, I don't love it. So I would personally keep them both on the bench. For the Raiders, Jacobs had a knee injury and an illness last week, so he only had 14 carries and 1 target. I'd expect him to see more volume going forward. We kind of figured going into last week when we heard about the illness, saw that he was limited in practices, that he probably wasn't going to have a great week. We'll have to watch the injury report this week to see if he's fully over the knee injury. And if he is, then the matchup is fine. I mean, the Broncos have a slightly above average run defense, but nothing that would make us just shy away from a running back going against them. I do have Jacobs as a low-end running back 1 right now. If he's limited in practice all week, I might drop that to a high-end 2. But if he practices in full on like Thursday, Friday, then I got to assume he's good to go, and I'm going to keep him as a low-end running back 1, and then you don't start any other Raiders running backs while Jacobs is healthy. I know Booker did fine last week, but it was really all off 1 touchdown run. We're not playing Booker. Next up, we have one of the more exciting games of the week where Justin Herbert and the Chargers will travel to Miami to take on Tua and the Dolphins. This game has a 48-point total, and the Dolphins are 2.5-point home favorites. For the Chargers, Justin Jackson was hurt at the very beginning of the game last week before he even touched the football, which resulted in Joshua Kelly getting 9 carries and 5 targets, and Kalen Ballage getting 16 carries and 3 targets. And remember, this is 1 week after Pope had more touches than Kelly as well. It doesn't seem like they want to give Kelly more of a workload, which is odd because they really did to start the year. I mean, remember at the beginning of the season, like Eckler was kind of almost splitting the work with Kelly. Well, now Ballage is splitting the work and getting more work than Kelly is. So I don't know what happened. I don't know who he upset, but they clearly don't want him to be the guy. They've now had 3 different running backs operate ahead of him. And so I don't trust Joshua Kelly. I am never, ever going to trust Kalen Ballage. So no, I'm not starting him outside of 14 or 16 team leagues. I would hope that Justin Jackson is back, but we're going to need to see practice reports before seeing that. But if Jackson's back, he's going to be the lead back. But, it's this knee injury, and we don't really know anything about it right now. I guess my lean would almost be that he's not going to play, but we just got to see. Again, if Jackson is out, though, I don't trust these guys outside of deeper formats because Ballage is not good, and they clearly don't trust Kelly. For the Dolphins, Jordan Howard continued, I would say, one of the worst seasons we've ever seen from a running back. He now has 28 carries for 33 yards and 1 reception for -3 yards. So he has 29 touches for 30 yards. He has been horrendous this season. You are not playing Jordan Howard. I don't even care what the matchup is. You can't possibly start him. Salvin Ahmed, I don't really know how to say his name. He got some work last week. I would say if you're in a 16-team league, you can maybe play him. But I'm not starting any sort of Dolphins running back unless their name is Myles Gaskin. When he returns, play him. Anyone else, I don't trust it. Their offensive line's not good enough. And I don't trust that they have an ability to use one guy unless his name is Gaskin. Next up, we've got Bills at Cardinals. This game has a very high 56-point total. The Cardinals are 2.5-point home favorites. For the Bills, Zach Moss has been out snapping Singletary in each of the last 2 weeks, and he did dominate the touches last week, although, as we noted last week, the game did not set up well for Singletary, so it wasn't surprising he only had like 5 touches. The Seahawks are a pass funnel, and so there wasn't really the opportunity for him to get a lot of touches, and we already know they refused to use him near the goal line, and so the touchdown upside is also very low. And then you look at the touch floor. Well, we'd be fine if he wasn't getting touchdowns, but he was getting consistently 15 touches a week. But he had 5 touches last week, and so I do not think you can start Singletary in a 10 or a 12-team league. As for Moss, he's like a low-end 2 to a flex play in those formats. He doesn't have massive touch upside, but the touchdown upside is relatively high. I mean, he's got a good shot of scoring a touchdown with such a high total in this game and being the very clear back they lean on in the red zone. So I think for him, running back 2 to a flex play, it's not a must start by any means. I have him in one league and I'm not starting him, but I think that if you have him, if you need to use him to flex, I feel comfortable in doing that. For the Cardinals, Drake is expected to miss another week, but keep an eye on this one. It is certainly possible that Drake is active, and so we need to watch his status throughout the week. If Drake is out again, Edmonds is a running back 1. He had 25 carries and 3 targets last week, and we should expect a similar amount of volume this week if Drake is out. If Drake's active, we're going to need to see how active is he, how much do they expect him to play, and I will adjust the rankings accordingly. Bengals at Steelers is up next. This game has a 45.5-point total, and the Bengals have moved up to 6.5-point road underdogs since there's a chance that Big Ben is out this week. The most likely outcome here is still that Big Ben plays, and I'm going to assume that he does for this breakdown, but if he is out, then it's a downgrade to James Conner and an upgrade to Joe Mixon because the line would shift in the Bengals' favor. But again, assuming that Big Ben plays, James Conner is still a running back 1. McFarland did get a little bit of work last week, but he still only played 12% of the snaps, and the dip in volume was more for Conner. I'm talking about his dip in volume was more that the Steelers just threw the ball every play. I mean, they threw the ball in 71% of plays. There was only 15 carries going to running backs, and that's not going to happen every week, so I still consider James Conner a running back 1. For the Bengals, Mixon is expected back, and that should relegate Bernard to a pure handcuff. The Steelers rank 2nd in rush defense DVOA, 9th in yards per carry allowed, and have given up the fewest fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. This is not a good spot for Mixon, and he is just a running back 2 this week. Seahawks at Rams is up next. This game has a 55-point total, and the Rams are 1.5-point home favorites. For Seattle, who knows? I mean, all of Dallas, Homer, and Collins played last week, and it's possible one of Carson or Hyde is active this week. We can't possibly make any sort of predictions before we get some sort of injury news, so it's not really worth speculating. I will say that this is not a good matchup for Seattle, and so it would be really tough trusting anyone not named Carson. So let's say Hyde comes back. Well, that probably puts Alex Collins on the bench, and now we have a 3-man committee between Dallas, Homer, and Hyde. Well, I don't really trust any of them in that circumstance. So unless Carson comes back, you're probably not starting any of these running backs. For the Rams, I'm sure they're going to do something surprising coming out of their bye. They're probably going to bench Henderson and play Akers every snap. I don't know. They'll do something ridiculous. But as we discussed with the Bills last week, Seattle's a pass funnel. And so the Rams should be looking to attack them through the air, not on the ground. For me, I don't see how you could feel comfortable starting Brown or Akers. Their role is just so up and down, and the matchup is not good, and so wouldn't start them. Henderson's fine in the flex because he has the most stable role in the team, and he does have the most upside, but I really think McVay is going to do something strange out of the bye, and so I don't have very much confidence in the Henderson play. Next up, we have 49ers at Saints. This game is a 50-point total, and the Saints are 9.5-point home favorites. For the 49ers, Mostert can be activated off the IR this week, but I think that's unlikely. They do go on bye in week 11, and so it would be smart for them to bring him back in week 12 fully healthy instead of rushing him back this week. That would lead the backfield to Jerick McKinnon and JaMycal Hasty, and maybe Coleman. I mean, he can also return this week, and so we don't really know what's going to happen with this backfield. Going to have to wait until Thursday, Friday, Saturday to really dive into it. If Coleman does return, I'd have a hard time starting any of these three because it would be a three-man committee, all with different roles, all just hoping that they're going to score a touchdown, and you can't possibly predict which one between Coleman, Hasty, and McKinnon is going to score a touchdown. So you'd be pushing your luck there. If Coleman's out and Mostert is also out, then McKinnon becomes a stronger play, but he'd still just be a running back too, and he'd be much stronger in full PPR. We thought Hasty would get a lot more work last week since the matchup was great, but the 49ers came out with just a truly embarrassing game plan, and they struggled to move the ball because of that. If they refuse to use Hasty in a really, really good matchup, then it's pretty unlikely they're going to use him as massive road underdogs in one of, if not the most difficult matchups for running backs. So I would fade Hasty and Coleman, and again, McKinnon would be better in full PPR if Coleman and Mostert are out. For the Saints, always start Alvin Kamara, and then Murray can be used in a deeper format if you're feeling lucky, but he's not worthwhile unless he scores a touchdown, and he's only done that in one game so far this season. Next up, we have the Sunday night matchup between the Ravens and the Patriots. This game is a 43.5 point total, and the Ravens are 7-point road favorites. For the Ravens, this is a good spot. The Patriots do not have a good run defense, and they're favorites. But if Ingram returns, then I don't think we can start any of them with confidence. Assuming that Ingram remains out, though, both Edwards and Dobbins would be viable plays in the flex in pretty much any format, but they'd be better in standard and then not so great plays in full PPR because the reception upside is just not there. But I don't think either would be must plays. I think that I have them in that 25 to 30 range for running back. And again, that's assuming that Ingram is out. But if Ingram is back, I mean, who's going to score the touchdown? You have absolutely no idea. They could all be used at the goal line. So if Ingram's back, I don't trust any of these three. For the Patriots, a lot depends on Damian Harris. He left week 9 early with a chest injury, so his absence could make an impact on things. Realistically, though, if he's out, they would probably just activate Sony Michel, and then they would use the exact same three-man committee, just with Sony, Rex, and James White. As big underdogs against the Ravens, I don't see myself trusting any of these backs. My order of value would be Rex Burkhead, then James White, then whoever's active between Harris and Sony, but I would prefer to bench all of them. The Monday night game is between the Vikings and the Bears. This game has a 44.5 point total, and the Vikings are 2.5 point road favorites. For the Vikings, always start Dalvin Cook. For the Bears, we're going to have to wait and see the status on David Montgomery since he is in the concussion protocol. If he passes that, then we're playing him as a running back too, given the volume. But if he's out, then both Ryan Nall and Cordero Patterson will see work at running back. I'd have a tough time starting either of them, but especially Patterson since he can only be played at wide receiver flex. He can't be played at the running back spot. But I guess Nall would be fine to use in the flex. My guess is just that they would skew a lot more towards the pass, so maybe both of them get more receptions, but I don't know. If Montgomery's out, Ryan Nall fine on like a 14-team league, you're probably just not going there in 10 or 12. So that's it for the breakdown of every backfield in Week 10. If you want to see my exact rankings on every player, you can check that out at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. That's the end of this one. Hope you all did enjoy. And if you did, then how about hitting that like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new? Thanks for watching.